Hi, it's Maggie the Irish Gypsy here to bring you your April 2020 general readings. We're looking at the first half of April from the 1st through the 15th. Welcome, everyone. First timers, newcomers, welcome back, followers and subscribers. Thanks for all that you do in support of this channel. I always like to open up with a note of gratitude because I am grateful for all the likes, the shares, the subscribes, even if it's nothing more than just tuning in today. Thank you. So this reading is for the air sign of Aquarius for the first half of April 2020 from the 1st to the 15th, and that's Aquarius Sun, Aquarius Moon, Aquarius Rising, or if your Venus is in Aquarius or if you are cross-watching for an Aquarian as well. General readings, of course, always resonate a little differently for everyone. So if you know all of your other signs, I strongly suggest you watch those as well for additional information and clarification of what's going on in your life. If any of the readings do resonate with you and you would like to take a deeper look at something, reach out for a personal one-on-one reading or information about that, you can click on the description link below, click on that little arrow that pulls down info, which you will then see, and my contact details. You can email me at maggie1mcguire@gmail.com. I offer a lot of different types of readings, a wide variety in all the main areas of life. And I do readings full time. It's all that I do, so I'm pretty diligent at working with both your schedule and mine in terms of timing in as timely a fashion as possible in terms of scheduling readings. And I can usually respond to initial inquiries with more information the same day or within the first 24 hours. So send me an email if you're interested, and I'd be delighted to work with you, and we'll set something up. Okay, let's move right into this reading. Aquarius, let's see what's in store for you for the first half of April, April 1st to the 15th, 2020. For those of you who need or want to know, I am using the Legacy of the Divine Tarot by artist Ciro Marchetti. Aquarius. Okay, Aquarius. We begin with the Chariot. Pretty powerful way to begin. I think Scorpio started that way too. The Six of Cups. Next we have the Two of Swords with the Moon. From the bottom of the deck, overall energy for the first half of April is the Eight of Wands. Interesting, Aquarius, because Aquarius, it feels like some of you are avoiding something. There's something that needs to be dealt with that you're avoiding. And you're either avoiding it or putting energy into doing it. You're either putting energy into avoiding dealing with something or putting energy into doing it in a way that isn't right. You know, as in like putting a Band-Aid on something that you really need to go in and get the proper medication to kind of deal with. I'm not saying it's a health issue. It might be that for some of you. I mean, you know, we're in the middle of tax season. It might be something financial. You know, maybe not doing what you're supposed to do or glossing over things you really need to add or put in there. I'm kind of getting that because I'm seeing all this internal, I'm seeing like this internal energy, the Two of Swords and the Moon here. The Two of Swords, so swords is governed by the element of air, which controls our mind. Thoughts, words, ideas, communication, belief systems, ideologies. So it's all about what goes on up in here: mental, cerebral, intellectual energy, higher learning, education, you know, truth, honor, integrity. So you have this internal kind of thought process going on here. We have the Two of Swords, which can represent feeling stuck, not seeing something which is actually right in front of you. It can represent a reluctance or a resistance to take that blindfold off and make a choice between these two swords, deal with something, some action needs to be taken or a path needs to be chosen, or some course of action. But you keep the blindfold on, because as long as you keep the blindfold on, you don't have to actually look at what something is in its full truth and reality and clarity. And therefore you don't need to take action on it. Because the Two of Swords can represent that kind of resistance to looking at something, because if you do, then you have to acknowledge it and therefore do something about it. Kind of like living with the gigantic purple elephant in your living room. It's there. You kind of see it out of the corner of your eye. You kind of clean up around it and stuff, but you don't really look at it or deal with it directly, because then if you do, then you realize, hey, I've got a gigantic purple elephant in my living room and I need to do something about that. Maybe a terrible analogy. Maybe I thought that because Nan's wearing a purple scarf. My favorite color. So as long as you don't directly look at it, then you don't really have to acknowledge the reality of it and therefore do something about it. You kind of keep your head stuck in the sand. That's what the Two of Swords can represent, especially because the moon is underneath it, clarifying it. Underneath it's what's driving it. The moon can be quite a positive card, but it's not entirely clear. The moon sheds light the moon sheds light, the sun sheds light, but the moon sheds a different kind of light. When the moon sheds light, it's a watery kind of light often. It can cast shadow. There's a lot of hidden nooks and shadowy recesses, and you're not quite sure what's in those shadows. It can represent a lack of full clarity, and it can also represent a distortion of reality. So it brings up these fears for us. For example, in broad daylight, when the sun is out shining on that gnarly old tree in your backyard, it's just a gnarly, cool looking old tree in your backyard. But, at night, when the moon shines a little bit, that gnarly old tree can look like a bear or a monster or some twisted living thing out to get you, right? So the moon can actually represent subconscious fears or things that come up out of us that are about something that exists, but because it casts shadows, and so it distorts what that is and brings up these sort of very deep, almost primal fears. And kind of the moon can represent, that our deep primal subconscious kind of compulsion, but sometimes fears as well. I mean, this card can be quite positive in terms of allowing, that deep sense of spirituality to guide you, kind of like the High Priestess, but clarifying the Two of Swords. I don't really like this combination of energy for you, Aquarius, because it's like it feels like there's something that you need to deal with. I'm not quite sure what it is yet. We'll pull some clarifying cards and try and break this down just a little bit more for you. And your fears of what it is and what it could be and dealing with it, they're kind of all swirling around. And I mean, it's obvious that something needs to be dealt with, but I think that you're deliberately not looking at it exactly because you have this fear that it's going to be overwhelming or that it's going to be a catastrophe. And, the problem with doing that, of course, as I'm sure you know, is that the longer we let something go, the actual bigger of a mess we have to clean up in the end. So it's kind of about taking the blindfold off and shedding light on this so that, your worst fears don't actually have to be as bad as they might be if you let something go. But there's like this reluctance to deal with it. So there's that energy, all this kind of internal swirly sort of energy. But then on top of that, there's all this action and there's also the Six of Cups, which is underneath the Chariot. Cups is water energy. It's often about our emotional landscape, relationships. The Six of Cups is a card that has a strong connection to the past, reminiscence, nostalgia, parents, childhood, roots of origin, where you grew up, long-term, old lovers, friends, long-term associates. Doesn't necessarily have to go back to childhood, but it does represent a historical connection. And it can sometimes represent, as it does quite clearly in this card, kind of looking back over your childhood, maybe a time when you were very much like a child, where you had, less fears and worries and concerns that we often have to shoulder as an adult in the adult world. And then we have like the Chariot and the Eight of Wands, which implies aggression, movement forward, taking the reins and charging ahead, communication, action, travel, taking charge of things. But underneath it and after it, there's this kind of, I don't want to deal with something. To me, Aquarius, this is coming across as whatever area of your life this is dealing with, whether it's work, career, money, finance, relationships. There's some kind of problem or something that needs to be dealt with. But your fear of dealing with it, it's like you feel like it's going to be this monster that you have to deal with, and it's just too overwhelming. So it feels like you're doing all of this other stuff on top of it to distract yourself from it, to maybe run away from it, to, it's like, oh, I have to do, it's time to do my taxes, but maybe I haven't done my taxes in a couple of years, or, oh, it's going to be so overwhelming and I don't want to deal with it. And I'm afraid everything's going to come, it's too much for me, it's going to be awful. And so I'm going to go away on a trip instead of doing it, something like that. It can also represent that something needs to be dealt with and you're taking charge of doing it, but not completely or not in the right way. But it feels more like distraction, like you're trying to distract yourself away from this thing that needs to be dealt with. And maybe you're thinking fondly back to, these times when you didn't have to deal with such things and worry about things like rent and mortgage and bills and taxes and, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, it feels like a lot of you may be like taking a trip or going away or traveling or something. But something's getting ignored in the process. And that in and of itself isn't bad, but something is getting ignored in the process. For some of you, you might be taking action on something very aggressively, very powerfully, but it's maybe a risky venture or something like that, but you're just refusing to kind of look at it that way. You're just focused on what you think it can be, so that's what it's going to be, and you're not paying attention to, all the potential things that could go wrong. Like there's all these red flags, but you're just going ahead anyway, kind of thing. That's what I'm feeling. I mean, it's a general reading, so it's going to resonate a little differently for everybody watching. But for who I'm reading for, the fundamental energy doesn't change, regardless of the details and specifics in your own unique lives. Fundamentally, something is being glossed over or ignored or not dealt with properly, and it needs to be. Because this could kind of end in disaster if you don't, or what needs to be dealt with that you're so afraid of dealing with now could actually become much worse if you don't, which is often what happens. So why the Two of Swords? What is it you're blind to, or why is this blindfold on? Why do you not? Why do you think you can't take the blindfold off to see? Interesting reading. Feels kind of complex. But I don't think the solution is any more complex than actually taking the blindfold off and dealing with it. But what is that about? The Five of Coins. And right behind it, the Five of Swords. The Five of Coins is a card fundamentally of insufficiency and lack. Coins is governed by the element of earth. So in the tarot, this is often about the physical structure of our day-to-day life, which is often why coins or pentacles can point to things like money, finance, property, real estate assets, job, your car, long-term relationships, because coins ultimately, or pentacles, I mean, it's called different things sometimes in different decks. It represents the physical day-to-day structure of our life and how stable we feel about that, which is often why it points to concrete things or long-term stable relationships. So it's about what gives us a feeling of safety, stability, solidity, continuity in our day-to-day life. What makes us feel safe, whether it's money, finances, certain types of relationships, or a combination of all of those things. So the Five of Coins is insufficiency and lack, not having enough money, being out of work. On a relationship level or an emotional level, this can represent feeling abandoned, rejected, shut out in the cold, blackballed, blacklisted, ostracized, not good enough. You're basically in need and you're kind of reaching out, in kind of this beggar sort of mode. So insufficiency and lack. So the reason why you're not looking at and dealing with this thing that needs to be dealt with is because you feel you don't have enough of something. to deal with it. If this is a money issue or a property issue or a tax issue, it could be like, oh, I know I'm going to owe all this money and I don't want to deal with it right now because I don't have the money. Instead of just looking at it, dealing with it, figuring out what you do have to pay out and figuring out if you can get that cut down or minimized, or maybe seek some outside help, you know. And then the Eight of Swords represents feeling trapped, bound, held hostage, unable to change a situation, powerless, a victim. But you're not. Remember, swords is about what goes on up in your head. So this is kind of a card of your fears, this moon, these huge feared, nameless fears, you know, or maybe not so nameless fears, you know, hijacking your logical, rational mind. Because the only thing keeping you trapped and held hostage, this woman here, is actually what's in here. And you feel like you can't change the situation. You don't have what it takes to change the situation. You don't have what it takes to get yourself out of it. So you're just going to distract yourself with like this other stuff right now. Probably not a good idea. It might be about, it feels like for maybe not all of you, but for a good portion of you, that whatever this issue is about, it's about the earth energy area of your life, whether that's actual money, finances, taxes, property, car, a long-term stable relationship or marriage. It's about the fears and the challenges about the physical structure of your day-to-day life, something under that umbrella. Let's pull one more clarifying card for what all this fear. Let's clarify the moon. I mean, this could be going about an issue, trying to resolve a concrete issue in a wrong way, an inappropriate way, or a sneaky way, or even an illegal way, like if it has to do with taxes or something like that. Interesting reading. The Five of Swords with the Ace of Coins. So here's more coin energy here. This is new beginnings, moving, relocating, receiving an unexpected sum of money to start over again. And the Five of Swords, which is a hard-won victory. Sometimes, though, the Five of Swords can come with cautionary advice. Winning has been a very difficult challenge. He has, but it's been a hard battle. Sometimes it can represent winning at all costs. Getting ahead at all costs. Like sometimes the Five of Swords could come up, you know, in a career reading where somebody is so ambitious to get to the top of the ladder that they're willing to do anything, say anything, step on whoever in order to do that, you know. And with the Ace of Coins, you know, could be money for some of you. It could be a job. It feels like you're avoiding dealing with something or dealing with it in the right way because you feel like in order to deal with it or deal with it in the right way, it's going to take away too much of what makes you feel secure, whether that's actual dollars and cents or people or, you know, what you have worked to build up, you know, whatever it is that makes you feel secure in your life, you want to hold on to it or get more of it to such an extent because that's what makes you feel safe, that you're either unwilling to deal with something that really needs to be dealt with, or you're going about dealing with it in the wrong way. That's kind of what I'm getting quite strongly. Very interesting. I mean, I always look forward to feedback on the readings, the general readings. But this one, it feels very specific, although what I can't tell because it's a general reading, it might be like a tax situation. It might be, you know, a home loan. It might be your job. It might be a car, you know, a loan for a car. It might be I mean, it could be relationship, but I'm not sure about that. It looks like you're charging for it to do something, but it's either doing it in the wrong way or you're doing it to distract yourself from what really needs to be done. Interesting. Let's pull some final advice and guidance cards, and we'll leave it there since we're already at 20 minutes. Fascinating, Aquarius. Advice and guidance for Aquarius, how best to navigate through this energy or this situation, at least for the first half of April. The Six of Swords, healing. Doing what you need to do in order to move away from the source of the conflict, but not move away in a I'm ignoring it, moving away. This is about real healing. And sometimes the initial phases of healing, healing implies that there was some hurt. And sometimes the initial phases of healing can be painful. Like after you have surgery or some injury, there's this rehab, and sometimes it hurts, especially in the beginning stages. But as you continue doing what you're supposed to do, everything that you're supposed to do in the healing process, you do heal. And it's transitional. So she's left the worst behind her, not quite to the other shore and on solid ground yet, but definitely in progress. So you need to begin that. So let's see if we can break that down. How to achieve this healing? How to achieve this healing? How can Aquarius achieve this healing? Justice in the upright, and the world right behind it. So justice in the upright is the reap what you sow card. What you put in is going to be reflected. The outcome or consequences or how this actually plays out will be dependent on what you choose, what you do, your course of action. You reap what you sow. If you put in a minimal amount of effort, your results will be minimal. If you put in a moderate amount of effort, your results will be moderate. Put in an extreme amount of effort, the extremes will be the result will be pretty extraordinary. This, and in the upper position and as advice, there's always cautionary advice with justice that the outcome is going to depend on what you do. So operate with transparency, with the highest level of honor and integrity you can. Do it the right way, because how it works out is going to be what's karmically fair and equal in spirit size. So do take the high road on this and do everything the right way. You need to address it and address it in the right way. In order to bring it to successful completion, reach the top of this difficult, challenging mountain, be done with it, know that you did it the right way, nothing's going to creep up behind you and bite you later, and now you're preparing for the next phase. So whatever this situation specifically is for you, Aquarius, it's time to take the blindfold off, face these fears, which almost always turn out to be less than the monsters we think they're going to be. I think perhaps, particularly if it's about money or finances or resources or anything to do with that, you may want to seek outside help. There's organizations set up, like, for example, I use taxes because that could be it. For some of you, we are in the middle of tax season. There are organizations, that will help you if you owe too much and you can't afford it. Maybe they'll cut it down or arrange for payments. Or if you haven't paid taxes in a while, they'll help kind of figure that out to in the right way, rather than just kind of ignoring it or running away from it or not doing it in the right way. That's an example, but it could be that as well. So you may need to seek some outside help and guidance. It's there for you, because the longer you ignore this or not deal with it the right way, the worse it's actually going to get. That's when things usually end up in like the Tower card situation in a negative way, because sometimes the Tower card can represent, winning the lottery or something like that, but not here, not with this situation. So you don't want it to get to that point, because it's much easier to deal with any difficulties when you're taking the reins into your own hands rather than waiting and letting spirit go, okay, well, we gave you opportunity, but you didn't, and so we're just going to swoop right in there and do it this way, kind of thing. It's almost always better to try and take care of this yourself. It looks like you have the opportunity to do so. Okay, Aquarius, that is your reading for the first half of April. For those of you for whom it did resonate, write and let me know. I'm quite curious. If you would like to take a deeper look at something, if they did resonate with you, or if any of the videos do, just click on that description link below. Click on that little arrow. You'll see some info. You can email me directly at Maggie1McGuire@gmail.com. I'd be delighted to work with you and set something up with you. I will see you all again, Aquarius, in a couple of weeks for the April 2020 mid-month general readings. Until then, as always, I wish you much joy, love, strength, and fortitude, and I hope to see you back here again in a couple of weeks. Take care. Bye-bye.